Washington is prolonging its war on Iran through an exceptional new sanctions campaign, openly calling it an economic D-Day. These are not simply another round of the sanctions Iran has entered for decades. The Trump administration is promising what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calls the greatest financial offensive ever mounted against an adversary. With most of Iran's energy, banking, and transportation sectors already sanctioned, the new strategy goes further. Washington wants to sever Iran's remaining economic lifelines by aggressively targeting third countries, banks, and companies that continue trading with Tehran. The message is isolate Iran or risk being punished yourselves. But what about China? China remains Iran's largest oil customer and has rejected Washington's unilateral sanctions, arguing that economic coercion will not resolve the conflict. Beijing also has leverage of its own. Escalating secondary sanctions against Chinese companies risks reopening a broader US-China economic confrontation. Russia has likewise opposed efforts to economically isolate Tehran. But the consequences extend beyond major powers. Georgia refused to adopt latest EU sanctions against Iran, stating national interests as a priority. A Georgian political analyst, Gia Kokashvili, has called Trump's economic blockade a major threat, warning that Iranian economic networks are deeply embedded in both the country's formal and informal economies. It's worth reminding that Iran shares land borders with 7 countries. That illustrates the extraterritorial power of US sanctions. Washington is not simply targeting Iran, it is attempting to determine who the rest of the world is allowed to trade with. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that Trump's economic D-Day is another iteration of decades of coercion, which, like its predecessors, is bound to fail. But Tehran is also issuing a much sharper warning. Mohsen Rezai, the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, threatened to target oil export routes from the Persian Gulf if Iran's neighbors join the US economic war. This is why we should not downplay sanctions. The word sounds bureaucratic, but the objective here is strongly coercive. To enforce a blockade that isolates Iran by denying it trade, to inflict more economic pain and forced submission. That's a war by other means. Inflation, collapsing purchasing power, shortages and unemployment are not side notes of economic warfare. They're collective punishment, an illegal crime that suffocates civilians. The military front may be changing, but the war is not ending, and its consequences are no less harmful.